Everybody was going to leave me. But I'm glad you're out there, and I'm glad you're there to hear what I have to share with you today. Thank you for the invitation to come. I have to admit I was hesitant because I'm supposed to be on holidays, but I'm here. And we're going to go on holidays tomorrow. I'm a teacher. I'm not a preacher. So I'm going to be one of those teachers and ask you a quiz question. Okay? So those of you who are in school or have just finished school, you should be able to answer this question. Of course, you have the advantage of having everybody else around here with you to help you with the answer. So here's the question. I don't know if I'm using this or this.
I'm just going to push this out of your way.
Okay. Thank you. What is one risk that you can take in your life that could help your faith to grow? One risk that you can take in your life that would help your faith to grow. I don't expect an answer from you, but I want you to think about it. Could it be standing up for a value you believe in when you're in a difficult conversation? Could it be expressing affection even though it may be a little bit difficult for you? Could it be taking on a challenge that you know will stretch you to the limit? I have a story to share with you. How many of you have been in or around hot air balloons? One person? I know my husband has. But nobody has been in or around a hot air balloon? Wow. Maybe that could be a challenge that you want to take on, is to step inside of a hot air balloon cage. Well, the story goes of a pastor and his wife who got this birthday gift, and it was to go into a hot air balloon and go for a ride. So they went out to the field where all the hot air balloons were, and this particular one was where they were supposed to go. And they got into this little basket with another couple. And I say little because the hot air balloons that I have been around come up to about here on me. And so on a normal-sized person, a taller person, probably come up to, midway somewhere. But this one came to their knees. And so he experienced one emotion that he didn't expect. What do you think that emotion was? Fear. So he figured that one good lurch and somebody would be going over the side. So what did they do? They grabbed hold of the sides and they hung on with sheer determination and white knuckles, because they were anticipating the worst. So he looked over at his wife, who was just across from him, and she didn't like heights at all, and he relaxed just a little bit because he realized that there was somebody in that basket that was more scared than he was. You see, she couldn't move at all because she was so scared. So he decided to do the next best thing. And that was to get to know the kid that was flying that hot air balloon. Because you see, they had placed their lives and their destinies in the hands of that pilot. And everything depended on his character and competence. So the pilot was asked what he did for a living. And the response that this pastor was looking for was something like a neurosurgeon or a NASA pilot that just barely missed going up into space. But he knew they were in trouble when his response was, "Dude, it's like this. I don't really have a job." He had gotten this job after he had been driving around in his truck drunk. He crashed it, and he badly injured his brother. And his brother was still recovering, so he took him out to watch hot air balloons as something to do. By the way, he said, if it gets a little choppy on the way down, don't be surprised. I've never flown this hot air balloon before, and I'm not sure how it's going to handle the descent. Now, do you know why they're hanging on with determination and white knuckles? At this point in time, the other couple that was with them hadn't said a word. So the wife looked over at her pastor husband, and she looked at him with a look, and that look was, do something religious. And so he did. He took up an offering. No, not really. He didn't take up an offering. But really the question was, can they really trust this pilot? You can talk yourself into saying that everything is going to be okay, and positive attitudes would certainly make it more pleasant of a journey. But the real concern was the guy flying this hot air balloon. Could he confidently place his life and destiny in that pilot's hands? Or was it time to do something religious? Every day, you and I, we take a chance on this leg of our journey on this planet. That's this balloon that's whirling around in a vast universe. We only get one trip, and I long to take that trip with a spirit of adventure and probably some risk, as most of you do. But sometimes this ride is uncertain. It'd be nice to have the walls of the basket a little higher and maybe a little thicker, and it'd be nice to know how it will handle on the way down. We can try and psych ourselves up into taking chances and believing that everything will turn out okay. But the real question is there someone piloting this thing? Are his character and competence such that he can be trusted? The story is like every human being's story, at least in part, about a struggle between faith and fear. Now, it seems like, excuse me, that our theme today is about water. We had a children's story about water. We had a beautiful young lady being baptized by water. I want to take us a little step further in dealing with water. What does it become, or what does it take to become someone to walk on water? We're going to look at the story of Peter, walking on the water with Christ. It's one of the greatest pictures that we have of that delicate balance between faith and fear. So I have a 3-minute video clip I'd like for us to show about Peter and Jesus walking on the water, and then I will continue.
truly, you are the Son of God.
It's an amazing story, isn't it? When you think about it, it wasn't quiet. When a storm comes up on the Sea of Galilee, it's noisy. And I don't know what the disciples were thinking. Who else could it be out there on the ocean or on the sea but Jesus himself? But they didn't recognize him. We just came from the Passion Play in Drumheller last week. We went and saw it. And it's the story of the crucifixion from Simon Peter's point of view. I wish you could have gone to see it, but it's not available anymore. But it really gave a new perspective on looking at Christ from Simon Peter's perspective. And it was really amazing. I don't know if some of you went or not, but it's really a good thing. But let's take a few moments this morning to look on what does it take, what goes into the making of water walkers. Number one, water walkers recognizes God's presence. Peter and his friends got into a little boat that afternoon to cross the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus wanted to be alone, so they were without him. Peter didn't mind. He was a fisherman. He knew how to handle life on a boat in the middle of the sea. But this time the storm blew in. It wasn't just a minor squall either. In Matthew, he says that the boat was tormented by the waves. What does that mean? Talk to me. What does it mean, tormented by the waves? Was it just tossed to and fro? That and much more. They were probably taking on a whole bunch of water. You heard it in the video clip. Bail, bail. What were they bailing? Trying to get the water out of the boat. I've been in a canoe when it's swamped. It gets full of water and you go down. No question about it. I think they were afraid of that. The only thing that they could do was just to keep that boat upright. Maybe they wished the sides were a little thicker and a little higher. I don't know. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe they were worried about staying alive than making it to the other side. Then one of the disciples noticed a shadow out on the water, moving towards them. It got closer, and it became apparent that it was the figure of a human being walking on the water. Have you ever walked on water? Have you ever tried to walk on water? I know when I took the kids to a swimming pool when I was teaching in the classroom, they would have these big mats out in the middle of the pool, and the kids would walk across it. That's probably the closest we'd ever get to walking on water on this earth. But let's think about it for a minute. The disciples were in distress, and the very person that could help them was coming towards them. The only thing is, they didn't recognize him. Amazingly enough, not being in a boat didn't seem to slow Jesus down at all. But the disciples were convinced that it was a ghost. And they cried out in fear. Who else could it have been? Matthew wants us to know that sometimes it takes eyes of faith to recognize when Jesus is around. Often in the middle of a storm, tormented by waves of disappointment and doubt, we are no better at recognizing Jesus' presence than those disciples were. We're too immersed in ourselves. Just exactly what was Jesus up to walking around at 3 o'clock in the morning on water? Mark tells us that Jesus intended to pass them by. Now the Greek word is, I'm going to butcher this, I know. The Greek word is parochomai. Komai, which means a defining moment when God made striking and temporary appearances in the earthly realm to a select individual or group for the purpose of communicating a message. Can you think of any other times in the Bible when the Lord passed by? Moses? When? God put Moses in a cleft of a rock so Moses could see while my glory passes by. The Lord passed before him. Can you think of any other times? Like I said, I'm a teacher, not a preacher. I need some response. Elijah. God told Elijah to stand on the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by. So when Jesus passed by the disciples on the boat, he was revealing his divine presence and power. And only God can do such a thing. Basically, Jesus was telling the disciples, you can trust me. You know my character and my competence. You can safely place your destiny in my hand. Take courage, it's me. Divinely appointed moments will come to you and me. Jesus still asks his followers to do extraordinary things. And if you're not looking for him, you just might miss him. 12 disciples sat in that boat. And we don't know how 11 of them responded to that voice. Perhaps with confusion, wonder, disbelief, or maybe all of them. But for one of them, Peter, he was about to become a water walker. He recognized God's presence, and he realized that it was an extraordinary opportunity for spiritual adventure and growth. So he got an idea. He decided to do something religious. Number 2, water walkers discern between faith and foolishness. So why doesn't Peter just plunge into the water? This story could be about obedience as well. That means that we will have to discern between an authentic call from God or what might be a foolish impulse on our part. Courage alone is not enough. It must be accompanied with wisdom and discernment. So before Peter gets out of the boat, he had better make sure that it's Jesus and that it's a good idea. So he asks for clarification. What does he ask? If it's you, command me to come. I think Jesus may have smiled in the dark just a little bit, because one person in the boat got it. He had a little inkling of what Jesus was up to. Also, Peter had had enough faith to believe that he too could share in that adventure. Number 3, water walkers get out of the boat. So what were the conditions under which Peter was supposed to get out of the boat? What were the conditions? It was stormy. It was probably raining. Was it windy? Yes. Was it a real quiet wind? No, it was loud. It was boisterous. The boat was tossed to and fro. So it would be hard enough to walk on water if it was calm and serene. Imagine trying to do it under adverse conditions. So if you were Peter and you know it was Christ walking on the water, would you choose the relatively safe, secure, and comfortable boat? Or would you get out of that boat where the waves were high and choppy, very windy, and there's a storm out there, and you could sink? What would you choose? The boat? Or get out of the boat? There is one guarantee, that if you don't get out of that boat, you will never walk on water. That's just the law of nature. So if you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. There is someone who tells us that there is more to life than sitting in the boat. We were made for something more than avoiding failure. There's something inside of us wanting to walk on water and leave ourselves to the high adventure of following God. So what's your boat? Our boat is whatever we're tempted to put our trust in, especially when life gets a little bit stormy. Whatever keeps us comfortable, that we don't want to give up, even if it's from joining Jesus on the waves. Whatever it is that pulls us away from the high adventure of extreme discipleship, that's our boat. What area in your life are you shrinking back from fully and courageously trusting God? Leaving that fear might be the hardest thing you've ever had to do. But if you want to walk on water, you have got to get out of the boat. Water walkers expect problems. So Peter goes to the side of the boat. The other disciples are watching. They have seen Peter shoot off his mouth before, and they wonder, what is he doing? He lifts one foot over the side, carefully hanging onto the side of the boat, white knuckles. Then the other foot goes over. Then he does something religious. He lets go. He abandons himself totally to the power of Jesus. And suddenly, for the first time in history, an ordinary human being is walking on water. For a while, it seems it's just Jesus and Peter that are right there. And then it happens. Peter looks at the wind. He sees the wind. What was he thinking? He became terrified when he all of a sudden realized that there was nothing underneath him. There was no boat there. The storm was no surprise. It had been there the whole time. What really happened was Peter's focus shifted from the Savior to the water, or to the wind. Because of the wind, some people decide never to leave the boat. If you get out of that boat, you face the wind and the storm. But there is no guarantee that life in the boat is going to be any safer. Everything is risky. Water walkers accept fear as the price of growth. That part we probably don't like very much. The choice to follow Jesus is a choice to grow, and the choice for the constant reoccurrence of fear. Fear will never go away. It'll always be there. Because every time we choose to grow, it will involve going into new territory, taking on new challenges, and each time that we do that, we will experience fear all over again. Fear and growth go together, like peanut butter and jelly. The decision to grow always involves a choice between risk and comfort. The 11 disciples in that boat could be called boat potatoes. They didn't mind watching, but they didn't really want to do anything either. Some of us in church these days could be called pew potatoes. We want some of the comfort associated with spirituality, but we don't want the risk and the challenge that go along with actually following Jesus. Yet Jesus is still looking for people who will get out of that boat. Every time we make the choice to get out of the boat, the next time will be a little easier to get out. Not that that fear will go away, but you will all of a sudden realize that you can handle that fear with Jesus. Water walkers master failure management. You all know about Thomas Edison, right? He invented what? The light bulb. So it's said that he experimented 999 times and failed. But he said no. It was 999 times that I learned and found out the way that electricity didn't work. It was that one time that we have what we have today. So here's the question. Was Peter a failure? I suppose in a way he was. But his faith wasn't strong enough. He saw the wind. He took his eyes off of Jesus. But can I suggest that maybe there were 11 other failures sitting in the boat? They failed quietly and privately. Their failure went unnoticed, unobserved, uncriticized. Only Peter knew the shame of public failure. He also knew two other things. He knew that the glory of walking on the water and being empowered by God to actually do it. He experienced that. And Peter knew the glory of being lifted up by Jesus in a moment of desperate need. He was drowning. He was going down. He shared a moment, a connection, a shared trust in Jesus that none of the others had. They couldn't because they didn't get out of the boat. The worst failure is not to sink in the waves, but to never get out of the boat. Water walkers see failure as an opportunity to grow. As soon as Peter asked Jesus for help, who's there? Jesus is there. He helps Peter physically by pulling him up out of the water, but he also helps Peter grow by pinpointing the problem. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? He makes that comment alone while they are together on the water, not in the presence of the others. It was after this moment that Jesus and Peter both got into the boat. Maybe Jesus didn't want to embarrass Peter in front of the other disciples, but Jesus gently and quietly helped Peter locate the source of his problem. He pinpointed it. So what was Peter's problem? Whether Peter walked on water or sank depended on whether he focused on the storm or on Jesus. Now he understood his dependence on faith much more deeply than he would have if he had never left the boat. It was his willingness to risk failure that helped him grow. Water walkers learn to wait on the Lord. The story about risk is also a story about waiting. The disciples had to wait in the storm until the fourth watch of the night before Jesus actually came to them. Even so, it's not until the end of the scripture that the disciples finally get what they were hoping for, relief from the storm. So why wouldn't Jesus have made the wind die down before Peter got out of the boat? Maybe because they, like us, we need to learn something about waiting. We have to learn to wait on the Lord to receive the power to walk on the water. We have to wait on the Lord to make the storm disappear. Water walking brings a deeper connection with God. Jesus is still looking for people to get out of the boat. So why risk it? Maybe here's a couple of reasons why. Number one, it's the only way for real growth. Number two, maybe it's the only way that true faith develops. Number three, it's the alternative to boredom and stagnation that causes people to wither up and die. And number four, it's a part of discovering and obeying your calling. But the best reason of all, the water is where Jesus is. The water may be dark, wet, dangerous, but Jesus is not in the boat. The main reason Peter got out of the boat is that he wanted to be where Jesus was. Peter's request was, Lord, command me to come to you. And then he acted. The disciples came to understand that they could place their destinies in Jesus' hands. The disciples understood that the one in their boat was the one alone who treads the waves of the seas, and they worshiped him. How about you? When was the last time you got out of your boat? I'd like to challenge the people that just graduated. What's your boat? We tend to seek the world of comfort. We try to construct manageable lives with some security and predictability to maintain the illusion that we are in control. Then God passes by and shakes everything up. The call to get out of the boat involves crisis, opportunity, very often failure, generally fear, sometimes suffering, always the calling to a task too big for us. But there's no other way to grow in faith and to partner with God. If you get out of the boat, two things will happen. First is that when you fail, and you will fail sometimes, Jesus will be there to pick you up. You will not fail alone. You will find that Jesus is very adequate to save. And number two, every once in a while, you will walk on water. So, here's your challenge for today. Go do something religious. Get out of the boat. Could you please rise? We have a song, don't we? Sorry. Rise anyway. Just bow your heads with me, please. Dear Lord, I just want to thank you for this wonderful Sabbath day. I just pray a special blessing on each one here, that we can experience your faithfulness, your trust, learn to obey, learn to step outside of the boat and to go do something religious, not just today, but in the days to come. We thank you for your love and your care, and go with us, I pray in your name. Amen.